ต้อนรับเข้าสู่ช่วงตอบโจทย์กับผมชัยรัตน์ถมยานะครับในช่วงเดือนนี้นะครับมีการประชุมที่สำคัญเกิดขึ้นที่ริโอเดจาเนโรนั่นก็คือที่การประชุม Rio Plus 20 หรือว่า Rio Plus 20 นะครับซึ่งก็จะเป็นการประชุมเกี่ยวกับเรื่องการพัฒนาที่ยั่งยืนนะครับแต่ว่าเราจะสามารถพัฒนาได้ยั่งยืนได้อย่างไรไปพร้อมๆกับการเติบโตทางเศรษฐกิจรวมไปถึงในเรื่องของการปกป้องแล้วก็พิทักษ์สิ่งแวดล้อมนะครับในวันนี้ทางรายการได้มีโอกาสมาพูดคุยกับคุณคุมิไนดูซึ่งเป็นผู้อำนวยการของ Greenpeace สากลครับ So Mr. Naidu, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
From Copenhagen to Cancun, Durban, and now Rio de Janeiro. But in the past, it seemed to, I feel that it seemed to fail to reach some agreement that we are expecting for. Do you think that we still have hope to protect our planet Earth?
I think we still have hope and we have a window of opportunity, but that window is closing very fast and time is running out because the science is telling us that we have to get carbon emissions to peak soon and start coming down. And you know, we know in countries like Thailand, the Philippines, in China, we are seeing already quite significant climate impacts as a result of drought, floodings, storms and so on. And things are going to get worse until we get our governments to act with courage and do the challenging things that we need to ensure that we can protect our environment and protect the climate for our children and grandchildren's future.
If we talk about protecting environment, I think that the situation has changed all the time. But right now, do you think that what are we fighting with to protect our environment?
Well, we have to use different strategies. We can't use just one tool only to fight with. We need, like Greenpeace, we do a lot of high quality science work and research to make sure that the demands that we are making is based on well-researched and scientifically backed positions. We have to inform the public and get the public more involved, and I am very encouraged to see in Thailand but also globally young people, because their future is what is at stake here, are getting more involved. So we've got to get people to be more engaged. And what's very positive is that whereas in the past the environment issue was seen as things that environmentalists do, today when we talk about climate change, we have the religious organizations, we have the trade unions, we have progressive businesses, you know, there's a bigger societal push. However, the reality is that those that are engaged in environmental crime, right? We am talking about players in the oil, coal and gas sector, those that are driving deforestation and ocean destruction and so on, sadly have a lot of power and a lot of influence over governments, and governments appear to be listening more to them rather than listening to the demands of the people to ensure that we can protect this environment for current and future generations.
Do you think that in these circumstances that many countries are facing the economic crisis right now, is it difficult to continue the momentum?
Well, interestingly, the economic crisis is actually a reflection of the environmental and ecological crisis, because this whole mode of growth at all costs, huge profits at all costs, the growing inequality between rich and poor that we see in virtually every country and between rich and poor countries, all of this is part of the current economic way of life. This is an opportunity in a way. We can see this financial crisis as an opportunity to rethink how do we want to share the resources on this planet in a much more fair and equal way. And we can turn this crisis into an opportunity. For example, if governments now wanted to seriously address building the economies, but doing it in a way that we also create decent green jobs, which are central for lives of ordinary people, if we brought job creation and investing in renewable energy together, we can have a win-win situation, because the job creation potential in moving in a green economy direction by investing in solar, in wind and other clean renewable energies have significantly more job creation potential. So I would say to governments who are saying that because of the financial crisis we can't do anything, that is not an acceptable excuse. And also we'll remind them that they can use the excuse of financial crisis only for the last couple of years. but they made commitments in Rio 20 years ago, and there was no financial crisis for a lot of that time. But actually, during that time, things got worse, and that's why people sometimes say that Rio plus 20 should actually be called Rio minus 20, because we actually went back since Rio.
Yeah, but do you think that it's some when you talk about creating green job and renewable energy, always has some argument that it's expensive. It's not, you know.
Yes, now that's a good point, because that is a lie, and let me tell you why. When the comparisons are made about how much does solar or wind cost, or how much does coal or oil or gas cost, what is conveniently forgotten by both politicians sometimes, but also the business folks, is that those industries, the dirty brown fossil fuel industries, have been beneficiaries of massive, in the trillions of dollars when you put it in a global basis, of taxpayer-funded subsidies, right? And if we look at solar or wind and so on, yes, in the last couple of years, there is some subsidies going, but it is minuscule, it's tiny compared to what the subsidies that are going into the dirty energy sources. However, in the last 3 years, we are seeing a massive drop in solar and in wind because of the fact that it is now going on scale. And we anticipate that it will drop more and more. Like you see, if you take a country like Thailand, right, where we have people in rural areas who are completely energy poor, that they are not connected to grids and all. If we are serious about bringing those people out of energy poverty and ensuring that their children can study at home in a light, that they can cook on a stove that is not dangerous and so on, the way we're going to reach them is not by building big coal power plants, for example, but it's through decentralized renewable energy projects, particularly solar. And Thailand, for example, is blessed with, like my country, South Africa, is also blessed with huge solar and other renewable energy potential. So if we are serious about addressing climate change, protecting the environment, but doing it in a way that generates jobs, but also deals with the injustice that some of us consume so much of energy, and some of us consume almost nothing, and those people who are out of the energy system must be brought in, and the way we can do that is through decentralized micro renewable energy system, and particularly solar.
You have to give the interview, and you say that traditional Western-led environmentalism has failed to make the connections between environmental, social, and economic justice. Can you explain more about this?
Well, to do it in a funny way, when I was appointed, President Obama appointed African-American friend of mine, Van Jones, to be his green jobs advisor. And the article focused on mainly Van Jones, and they had one paragraph on me, and the title of the article was, "Why it is so difficult to be black and green at the same time," right? Because there's this thing that poverty and development and so on is here, and environment is here. That is a myth that has to be broken, right? We have to understand that averting catastrophic climate change and addressing global poverty can and must be two sides of the same coin. Because let's be clear, the sad, sad reality is the people that are paying the first and the most brutal price for climate impacts are those that have been least responsible. It is people who are living in rural areas where flooding is happening, droughts in Africa, Bangladesh, people are already having to move from certain coastal regions and so on. So the poor suffer the most as a result of climate impacts. On the other hand, in a place like Congo, for example, where there's a massive precious forest to be protected, when people don't have any electricity, nothing, they are going to be forced to chop trees to actually try to get some fuel to cook food and so on. So bringing these two challenges together is the right way to do it. And we have to recognize that if we are innovative, if we are creative, we can get a win for the environment, a win for development, a win for job creation, and ultimately, I would say, a win for peace and security, because if we don't address this, the levels of growing inequality in the world is going to explode in all sorts of conflict and even violence. And that's part of what should be giving us the energy to get a good result in Rio. However doubtful that might look, we must still continue to push in the coming weeks.
But is there any possibility in the future that you said that the Western-led environmentalism going to be like an Eastern-led environmentalism in the future?
Well, to be fair, I think, even before I joined Greenpeace, organizations like Greenpeace and so on were already beginning to make that shift. Because like if we take our work in Sumatra and in Indonesia more generally, everything that we have been doing there has been very connected with communities. We're working with the people who live in the forests, with the trade union movements and so on. And I think that what we are also seeing now in Europe, because of the financial crisis, the folks there will make the connection as well between the social and the environmental, because they can actually see that. When we had a meeting with Angela Merkel during the campaign, for the nuclear phase-out, one of the things we said to Chancellor Merkel, with all the trillions of dollars that the nuclear industry has been getting, today in Germany, it only creates 30,000 jobs. The wind sector alone, which is young with a tiny amount of investments, is already generating 300,000 jobs, right? So, and that argument played very well in the general public. So you can see that opinions around the world, in developed and developing, in West and East, is moving in a direction of where these agendas should be brought together. And don't forget that 20 years ago in Rio, that was what Rio achieved. The whole idea of sustainable development, it was saying we can have development, and we might need to have development, but it also has to be done in a sustainable way. But the reality is, we cannot lie about a basic fact. If we think that everybody in the world is going to be able to, if we are to deliver the lifestyles that people in developed countries have got used to, and the elites in developing countries have got used to everybody on the planet, we will need 5 planets, right?
Wow.
So we have to also start thinking and questioning our consumption patterns, asking some fundamental questions about what constitutes happiness, because the notion of happiness is, possess, more. And we have to get smarter to do more with less moving forward.
But rising economy like China, they try to catch up, to have like economy like in the West. So it's going to be quite a real challenge for them also to do at the same time, to catching up with the economic growth and also to protect the environment. And I think it happened in many countries in Southeast Asia also. We try to catch up, we try to build up the economy.
You see, I myself come from the anti-poverty movement. That's where I've spent most of my life, right? And the right to development for countries like in Southeast Asia or in Africa, it is a right that we should not negotiate, right? However, we should not be so foolhardy and focused on saying, well, they did it that way. That's how the West build their economies. Therefore, we have a right to do that, even if it means that we threaten our own country and the whole world as a result of the impacts. We should not follow the bad example of dirty, energy-driven economic development that the Western countries actually built their economies on, right? However, we should do, in a way, what China is doing in one way, because when I met with the Chinese chief negotiator, who's also the vice minister for planning, for the climate negotiator, one of the things that struck me was, as the New York Times journalist puts it, Thomas Friedman, he says, forget about the arms race, forget about the space race. The only race that will matter in terms of which countries are competitive and which companies are competitive in the future are those that win the green race, right? So those that get as far ahead of the green technology curve now. Therefore, it's not a surprise, in the first quarter of 2010, China surpassed every country in the world as the biggest investor in renewable technology. Last year in Europe, 90% of the solar panels that were bought and installed in Europe was produced by China. So China has turned renewable energy and developing its capability into an advantage. And I would say that Thailand and every other country, the longer we hesitate and don't invest seriously in the medium to long term, we are going to be in a disadvantageous position, because whether we like it or not, it is coming, right? And once people start seeing more and more impacts, there's going to be more and more pressure for a movement away from oil, coal, gas, and a move to, solar, wind, and other renewable energies. And if that happens and it's left too late, then those countries that didn't get going will not have the technological skills, won't have trained people, won't have, the IP, intellectual property, because already, those companies that invent some technology are patenting it and trying to hold on to it to make as much money. So we have to get going now, and those that drag the feet, those countries and companies that drag the feet will suffer in the future.
You had the chance to meet the Indonesian president. How was it?
We met the Indonesian president 2 days ago. It was a very cordial, open, constructive and positive meeting. We agreed with the government of Indonesia in terms of the emissions targets that it set, which is 26% by 2020, and with international support 41%, as well as we agreed with their goals on growth, which is 7% moving forward. We talked also about the moratorium on forests, and we are keen and we encourage the government to continue to consider extending the moratorium to ensure that what the moratorium was intended for is actually achieved. We also were very pleased that the President said that our ship, the Rainbow Warrior, will be welcome to come into and visit Indonesia next year.
Is it going to be the first time for the Rainbow Warrior to visit Indonesia?
No. Well, for this Rainbow Warrior, because this is a more environmentally friendly ship that we built ourselves. No, because the Rainbow Warrior, what people don't know, when the tsunami hit in Aceh especially, we were there within days, and we were one of the first organizations to be on the ground to support. So we assisted with the various relief efforts and so on. And also it was there some years before as well. So we hope the President will receive the ship, because we'll use it to raise awareness and around the need to have an energy revolution from a fossil fuel-based economy to a green economy.
For the Greenpeace campaigning is always very creative and make a headlines for the media and draw attention for the public. But how can you link your activity and campaigning to the real action for the public?
That's a very important question, and that's something that we are doing and we are now continuing to grow, which is what we are saying is that not all of us can go and climb an oil rig or take some high risk on trying to oppose those that are engaged in breaking the law. Because be very clear, most of the time that Greenpeace takes these actions, it's when even the law might not be so strong as we'd like it to be, but oftentimes the laws are being broken by these companies, especially at sea, with overfishing and so on. So what we're trying to do now is to mobilize large numbers of people to campaign together with us. And that's happening really well now. Some of the victories that we won in the last couple of years has been as a result of thousands and thousands of people joining us and sending a demand to the companies using social media and so on. And that is ensuring that we're winning some of those struggles more quickly. So for example, even with Facebook, right? Facebook was building its data center using coal. And what we did was we used Facebook to launch a campaign against Facebook. And it took us 6 months, and we're very happy that Mark Zuckerberg and the Facebook now have agreed to move to clean energy. But that's only happening because there's a lot of participation. The other thing I would like to say is that we have to work with the religious leaders, with trade unions, with women's movements, and indigenous peoples, and so on. And we are committed now and are working very well in a range of alliances in all the places that we work.
Because I think that it's quite challenging, because now I think that many people in the world know about how important the environment is. But when you come to like daily life, it's like, well, they just choose like a comfortable way for them to do. But they know that how important it is. But when it leads to the action is another matter, another issue for them.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, right? But I think to be fair to ordinary people, I think ordinary people have already are ahead of their governments, in the sense that quite often what is lacking is an enabling leadership and an enabling environment or context which will send a clear signal and clear support. Let's take, for example, renewable energy light bulbs, energy efficient light bulbs. Governments can simply, as some governments have done, said, you have 18 months or 2 years when everybody, the only light bulbs can be bought is energy efficient light bulbs. Then if you talk about recycling our waste, it also means that national governments have to support local governments to ensure that they are able to provide the possibilities of how people can actually have the waste separated and collected and so on. Because even if, I know people in many countries would love to do that, right? Unless they make their own plans and do it, there's virtually, very limited real local government support. And many local governments would like to do it, but they also need some support through national legislation. And then even small things like, about bicycle lanes, trying to ensure that people who want to ride bicycles, and a bigger level about investing properly in public transport. I mean, there are many people in places like Bangkok, where you have to spend so much of time in the traffic, would love to have a good, efficient, reliable public transport system, and that would encourage people to actually, leave their cars at home and so on. But so what I would say is, yes, of course, people have to be part of the solution, absolutely. But I think let's not blame people when our leaders often are not showing the political will and innovation that is necessary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Naidu, for
Thank you.
joining the program.
Thank you very much for having us.
และทั้งหมดก็คือรายการตอบโจทย์ในวันนี้นะครับผมและทีมงานต้องขอลาไปก่อนสวัสดีครับ